Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Sonia Gray and this is From the South, the daily news brief from Telesur English. And we start this new edition right now. We begin in Chile, where Pope Francis has been holding a mass in the south of his country on the third day of his visit. Mapuche indigenous people took part in the mass at Macayway Air Force Base in the city of Temuco. In his homily, the Pope denounced the use of violence against indigenous communities defending their rights and urged the Mapuche people to use their unity as the best weapon to defend their culture and reclaim their ancestral lands.
It is essential to defend the idea that a culture of mutual recognition cannot be built on the basis of violence and destruction, which ends up taking human lives. You cannot ask for recognition by annihilating others, because that only generates greater violence and division, its forms.
Ahead of the pontiff's arrival in Temuco, 3 new arson attacks damaged Catholic churches in different regions of the country. The attacks destroyed 2 churches in the Araucania region, homeland of the Mapuche community, and another in the capital, Santiago. The unknown attackers used incendiary devices to set the temples on fire. 5 other churches were burned in the days before Francis arrived in Chile. On Tuesday evening, Pope Francis met in private with victims of sexual abuse by Catholic priests. Crowds waved as the Pope arrived in the papal nunciature in Santiago for the meeting behind closed doors. Earlier in the day, Francis said he wanted to join his brother bishops in asking forgiveness for the abuse by members of the clergy. But some victims of abuse were not satisfied with the Pope's words. They and their supporters protested with black balloons as the Pope mobile made its way through the Chilean capital. They said the bishops responsible for covering up the abuse should be in jail.
Pope Francis has been welcomed by crowds of Chileans and authorities, which described his presence as a blessing for the nation. However, indigenous groups, human rights organizations, social movements, and individuals are protesting against his visit. Abuse victims also joined the crowds in Santiago on Tuesday to denounce Pope Francis, speaking out against the church's record on covering up abuse scandals and reportedly protecting its officials mired in allegations. The demonstrators carried black balloons, which they released into the air close to when the pontiff was passing through.
As head of a group of criminal priests, he is responsible. He should hand them over to justice and to follow the normal channels just like any other normal citizen. However, he protects and hides them. This is what we saw with Bishop Barros, who was at Mass next to him in O'Higgins Park. In reality, it will be a great step forward if he recognizes that he is a criminal who covers up for other criminals.
As the Pope was making his way to hold a mass in Santiago's O'Higgins Park, police forces clashed with several demonstrators and used water cannons to repress them. Several people were chased down and detained.
For us, the Pope's visit hurts us deeply. I repeat, this does not have to do with faith. We do not want conflict with those people who feel something for this man. What worries us is that there are government officials who are involved in economic crimes. And there they are, sitting in there. Our Chilean criminals who work for the government are sitting in there with that man.
LGBT members in Santiago staged a protest where they kissed in front of the police to protest what they believe is a discriminatory treatment of the church towards the LGBT community.
Regarding the Pope's visit, he is here doing his thing, and we are here to take advantage so we can highlight the problems we have with the church. I don't believe that he has come here to resolve anything. He comes here to hold a mass, to carry out an activity, and we have to be able to get around that so that we can show that we truly need help.
Footage shows police bundling a number of protesters into the back of vans. Also in Santiago, protesters dressed as nuns and denounced the high cost of the visit. The Chilean Church's involvement in sexual abuse scandals also came up for protesters, and the Catholic Church's popularity in Chile is now the lowest in Latin America. Many now see it as a pillar of the conservative establishment.
Pope Francis, who said there will be zero tolerance in sex abuse case in the church, named Bishop Juan Barros, who had been accused of covering up the biggest pedophile of the Chilean church history, and following the reaction of rejection from the community and from the clergy, he called us idiots.
Since last week, protesters have launched firebombs on at least 4 churches, including on Tuesday, Cuenco's local chapel. This visit by the Pope to Chile and Peru has seen perhaps the strongest protest against the Catholic Church of any of the Latin American tours. As the pontiff now journeys on to the city of Temuco, near the Mapuche community areas, it remains to be seen what further objections, demonstrations, and actions will be staged against his presence.
After Chile, the Pope goes to Peru, where there are also growing voices of protest against the investment of $11 million by the Peruvian government to cover the logistical cost of the visit. Our correspondent in Lima has the details.
Pope Francis will be housed at Lima's Apostolic Nunciature. Nuns will oversee his food, and the Swiss Guard will be in charge of security. A 10-car entourage will accompany the Pope Mobile in every city he intends to visit. The government has invested $11,400,000 to improve the infrastructure in these places.
The investment covers community services, security for the Pope's retinue, and setting up the required infrastructure for a papal mass, which will gather over 1 million people in Las Palmas, close to 400,000 in Huanchaco, and 120,000 in Puerto Maldonado.
The government's announcement of such a large investment for the Pope's visit was not well received by those polled on the street.
I do not agree with spending such a large sum. We are a poor nation. Our streets are full of holes. We've been through so much. How could this be possible? The Vatican is the world's largest bank. They have so much money.
We're a secular state, and that wasn't considered before spending that money. We are financing the church using state funds. That should not be happening.
We should be frugal while still celebrating his visit. Everyone is happy he's coming, and he's not asking for this money. It's just wrong.
While the government sets apart millions of dollars to fix the locations the Pope will visit, over 100,000 citizens have been waiting for a year to have their home rebuilt, as promised by the government after the devastation left by El Niño Costero.
The government has invested less than $1 million in rebuilding homes. With 11 million, we could have easily built anywhere between 15 and 1,800 homes.
One of the affected communities will be visited by the Pope during his stays in Trujillo. Locals are hoping for a miracle, just like the other 3.5 million people who will mobilize to be present during the many activities he has planned.
And our correspondent in Lima, Veronica Inchalsti, has more on the Pope's visit to Peru.
Pope Francis is expected to arrive tomorrow in the capital, Lima, at 5:30 p.m. local time. There are no public activities scheduled, and he will only have a meeting with bishops at the papal nunciature in Lima. On Friday, he will have a very intense agenda. Early in the morning, he will travel to the Amazonian city of Puerto Maldonado, where he will offer a public mass and meet with representatives from 2,500 Amazonian communities from Bolivia, Brazil, and Peru. He is expected to deliver a message in reference to the Laudato Si encyclical in favor of protecting the environment and to call out authorities for the increasing levels of deforestation in the lungs of the world, as the Amazon rainforest has been called. After that, he will return to Lima in the afternoon, where he will have a brief meeting at the presidential palace with President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, which the official agenda says will only last 15 minutes. He is expected to refer to the political situation now that Peru is facing one of its worst crises in decades. On Saturday, he will be in the Trujillo and will offer a big mass in Huanchaco, where 500,000 people are expected to attend. In the afternoon, he will bless several Peruvian virgins, including the Mutupe and Otusco virgins, at the Trujillo. Finally, on Sunday, on his last day in the country, he will have various activities. He will visit Lima Cathedral, the sanctuary of the Lord of the Miracles. He will have a lunch with the bishops, and at 4 p.m. local time, 2 million pilgrims will be waiting for him at the Air Force Esplanade of Las Palmas for another Mass. After this, he will return to Rome.
We thank Veronica for that report. The U.S. Treasury has warned U.S. investors to approach Venezuela's proposed cryptocurrency with caution, saying that it may contravene U.S. financial sanctions against Venezuela. The warning follows President Nicolas Maduro's announcement this month that his government will soon issue 100 million petros, backed by an equivalent number of barrels of oil, partly to get around the U.S. sanctions. And we'll be back very soon, so stay with us. Brazil's former president, Lula da Silva, has promised to clear his name ahead of a ruling on his conviction for alleged corruption. Lula joined supporters and leaders of social movements at a rally at a theater in Rio de Janeiro on Tuesday night. Our correspondent in Brazil has more.
Brazil's artists and intellectuals mobilized on Tuesday in Rio de Janeiro to defend the right of Lula da Silva to be a candidate. The capoeira group Sensala traveled for 4 hours to join the rally.
They want to ban the candidate that came out with an 82% approval rate in a country where the elite has always governed and never got even 40%.
Inside the theater, there wasn't enough space for all of the people that arrived to demand evidence against the left-wing leader.
To know that justice chooses its allies, to know hunger, misery, we know that from always, but we also know the resistance from always.
Lula is accused of receiving an apartment as a bribe, a disqualified accusation according to hundreds of jurists, artists, and intellectuals who have denounced that the legal process is truly a political persecution. Tuesday's mobilization has reaffirmed once again that defending Lula's candidacy is really defending democracy.
As a regular citizen, he has the right to be a candidate, and that is protected by the Constitution.
I have the hope that Lula will win and he will be our president again.
In his speech, Lula demanded that the court read the whole case against him next week. Out of all the cases in the Lavo Jato operation, the one that was investigating Lula was made in record time. According to intellectual Emir Sader, the reviewer had 6 days to analyze these 250,000 pages of the judicial piece.
The only thing I ask is that I don't try to make a political decision and condemn an innocent man.
The Rio Grande del Sur court will have the responsibility to carry out the judgment in its second instance. The mobilizations in defense of Lula da Silva and the Brazilian democracy will intensify until the 24th. A mobilization of the people that denounces that an election without Lula would be a fraud.
Ecuador's former president, Rafael Correa, is forming a new party after the electoral court ruled that President Lenin Moreno remains the leader of the ruling party Alianza País. Correa and his supporters called for mass resignations from Alianza País. Their new party will be called Citizen Revolution after the process led by Correa for 10 years until he left office last year. Correa's supporters accused President Moreno of betraying the legacy of the movement they shared. And the split in the ruling party comes the day after Ecuador marked the 11th anniversary of the Citizen Revolution. Our correspondent Denise Herrera has more.
The Citizen Revolution government has been in power for 11 years, and a number of activities were organized by lawmakers who support Rafael Correa against the referendum. The political movement that followed Correa gathered in Quito's historic center to lead a plaque in defense of the Citizen Revolution.
Today we're celebrating the 11th anniversary of Citizen Revolution, led by Rafael Correa. For that reason, we decided to put a plaque in the Carondelet Palace, in the Central Square, in the Independence Square, with our heroes. A plaque against treason. A plaque against the treason that we cannot accept. Democracy cannot have traitors. We are telling Lenin Moreno that he has betrayed the people who voted for him and those who campaigned for him.
Some disturbances broke out when the political groups tried to lay the plague in the square. People were attacked by the police who were trying to stop them.
They cannot take away from us the right to continue transforming the country. They cannot take away the right to continue building equity and justice. This referendum is not legal. They are taking the power of the state and they are violating the Ecuadorian people's rights.
This anniversary was celebrated in the middle of the campaign for President Moreno's referendum in February, and in the middle of a dispute between Moreno and the former president, Rafael Correa. It is difficult not to associate the citizen revolution with him, even though he is no longer the head of the political party Alianza País.
Political violence against human rights defenders, social leaders, and former FARC guerrillas continues in Colombia. Different sectors are demanding the government guarantee their safety. More in the next report.
Using this pamphlet, the Autodefensa Gautanista paramilitary are threatening the FARC political party in Valle de Cauca. They warn of a plan to blow up their headquarters and murder their members. A FARC spokesman has rejected these intimidation tactics and stressed that they continue working towards peace and reconciliation.
We want it to be known that our party is working openly, legally, and with open hearts to everyone so we may walk the path to absolution, to reconciliation and hope. We welcome all of you to work with us, to not allow us to become dispirited, and to continue the fight for a new Colombia that will serve the masses.
The pamphlet is also threatening social and victim organizations, as well as community leaders. 116 social leaders were murdered in 2016, and 173 in 2017. Likewise, 40 former FARC members and 12 of their family members have been murdered since the peace treaty was signed. In the past 2 years, political violence has claimed at least 341 victims.
Campesino leaders who are asking for land reparations are being targeted in particular. Other targets include human rights defenders and community leaders. As such, we are worried that the government is breaching their commitment to protect social leaders' lives.
On top of a lack of a guarantee for their life, there's also the government's denial of how systematic the crimes are, or about the political violence behind it all.
Threats have a central objective, which are to create fear, to sow fear in the population, to immobilize people and prevent organization. They want people to lose their political rights. This is alarming, because it's endangering what hope we have for the political transformation of Colombia. If people are afraid during an electoral period, they will simply stay at home.
Those facing threats and intimidation fear that political violence will be normalized. They fear that indifference and indolence by the Colombian government will reign supreme. They fear that lost lives will stop having meaning and become nothing but numbers.
Experts in Cuba are predicting an increase in forest fires in 2018 because of the damage caused by Hurricane Irma, which hit last year. The risk increased after Irma brought down trees, resulting in an accumulation of foliage on the ground. 2017 saw at least 350 fires, which damaged more than 6,000 hectares of land and caused huge economic losses for the nation. The United Nations actually puts Cuba ahead of reforestation efforts in the region. In Trinidad and Tobago, the environmental group Fishermen and Friends of the Sea successfully obtained a temporary injunction to halt a $59 million highway extension in East Trinidad. The General Secretary of the group, Gary Aboud, claims the highway will damage the environmentally sensitive Aripo savanna, which is home to several species, including the red-bellied macaw. The temporary injunction will last until Monday, when there will be another hearing. More on this, we're joined by Gary Aboud on Skype. He's the General Secretary of Fishermen and Friends of the Sea, the organization challenging the construction of the highway. Hello, Gary. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us, and thank you.
So how did you all find out about this potential damage to the Oripos Savannah? We saw the video there.
We have particularly well-evolved legislation to protect the environment. So there is a level of transparency and consultation that's supposed to occur. We were informed of the fact that the 9 technical officers who work in the environmental agency all condemned the applicant because the applicant never supplied critical data to review the application, such as baseline data. Now, this area is an environmentally sensitive area which is legislated for the highest degree of protection. Only 1 of 3 places in the entire country. This area that you see here, if the camera, when the drone is complete on this filming, you'd realize that what they're supposed to put is a buffer zone that is 1.5 times wider than the highway. That's the highway you're looking at there, and it's cutting through a forest reserve. There are also issues about the forest reserve, but outside of the forest reserve is this environmentally sensitive area which contains biodiversity that you cannot imagine. It contains plants, for instance, that eat insects, a very rare and sought after item. But the critical issue here is that in the first instance, they didn't grant the approval lawfully because there was no consultation as required in law. And the senior parties involved in the Environmental Management Authority, politically appointed, of course, overruled the technical officers and granted the approval in a way that does not consider the endemic species and the multiplicity of an ecosystem that contains amphibians and reptiles and mammals.
Quick question. How confident are you that the injunction will be upheld on Monday, considering that the construction of this highway has been particularly controversial?
Well, confident it depends on your audience, because your audience hopefully are some people who have an appreciation. That's the buffer zone on the left hand of the screen, and behind that bar of trees, which is just about 20 feet wide, it's supposed to be wider than the highway cutting itself. So there's a violation there, and we have other footage of other violations occurring. And this illegal activity, when I say illegal, I mean what they have done is they have sprung the construction on us, because they have given us assurances inside and outside of court, both in person and in formal writing, that the application had not yet been complete. And so when they started, what you're seeing there is just 1 week of work. Yes?
But considering that they've sprung the construction on you, are you confident that you're going to get a positive response in the court on Monday? That's what I'm asking. What do you assume your chances are?
I am more confident because you and your audience have a technical appreciation of environmentally sensitive species and areas. And for those who care to read about it, you can go onto the Fishermen and Friends of the Sea website at FFOS on Facebook. You just put Fishermen and Friends of the Sea Facebook, and you can see for yourself firsthand a lot of the degradation. If you also go to the Environmental Management Authority of Trinidad and go to their website, you will see that they have large sections of their website devoted to describing in a proper technical terminology some of the intricate biodiversity that exists in this area.
We're running out of time, so we're going to have to cut the interview short. I will link to your website and to the EMA's website on the Oripos Savannah on my Twitter account, so any tell us you. So thank you so much for talking to us. We've been talking to Gary Aboud. He is the General Secretary of Fishermen and Friends of the Sea. And we are going to go to a very short break, so please stay with us.